Hey friends, welcome to Bokeh, a podcast exploring the ever-blurring lines between the personal and business lives of professional photographers. This is your host, Nathan Holritz, and I'm happy that you can join me in connecting with photographers and entrepreneurs as we discuss photography, business, and that sometimes messy thing we call life. This podcast is brought to you by Milu, the simplest way for photographers and coordinators to collaborate on shot lists and timelines for weddings, parties, and other amazing events. Visit Milu, MIILU.com. This podcast is also brought to you by Photographers Edit, custom image editing for the professional photographer. Visit photographersedit.com. All right, Bokeh Podcast listeners, we are back for another podcast interview today with a brand new guest. Again, Tosha Gaines. And Tosha, we're going to get into you and I were actually chatting before we started recording here, and we were kind of already going deep, and we barely touched the surface, I think, of what we're going to get into in conversation today, talking about healing through photography. But welcome, first of all, to the show.
Oh, thank you. It's nice to be on.
Well, and I appreciate you making the time. I know you made some kind of rearrangements for the sake of quality of audio and internet connection and so forth. I appreciate you making time to do that. And let's just jump in, because I know we're going to have a lot to talk about when we get to the primary topic today. Some of these introductory questions that I usually like to ask, and the first one has to do with brand position. Now, I want to give a little bit of context to our listeners. You're based in what market currently as a photographer?
Basically in Birmingham and Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay, cool. And you're actually not too far away from me. I'm in Chattanooga right now. We're recording this remotely, but Birmingham, Atlanta area markets, those are two pretty big markets. And then what type of photography are you offering to those markets?
Right now, I do corporate, commercial, lifestyle photography, and I do a lot of influencer and branding for sure. So I do mostly that type of work, and I do occasional portraits, but it's only like seasonal. But that's my main target right now. Okay, but portrait work seems to be kind of the primary focus, and I'm noticing that here on your website too. So for those of you listening in, if you go to Tosha, Tosha Gaines, Gaines.com. Very simple. We'll link to this in the show notes as well at bokehpodcast.com. But if you go to toshagaines.com, you'll see examples of this portrait work on the homepage. And I have to say, again, and I know this is something that I say in the podcast a good bit these days, I like variety. And you have a wide variety of portraiture, the styles of portraiture there on the homepage, which is really, really nice. Oh, thank you. I really do enjoy it. So,
well, I'm curious. So, portrait photographers, I mean, if we're being realistic, there are a lot of them, particularly in the Atlanta market, probably some as well in the Birmingham market. But talk to me about how you differentiate yourselves from them. What is your brand position or the unique value proposition that you bring to those markets?
Well, I'm pretty much, if I am meeting a client, I don't shoot anybody I don't know, because I'm about the personal space thing. I need to know who you are before I shoot you. And I need to make sure that, hey, we're going to be a good fit, because one, I'm a very outgoing person, and through my sessions, I do say off the wall things just to make people comfortable. So I mean, you got to. I'm like, I can't shoot you if your shoulder's way up, and I'm like, okay, you have no neck. Can we fix that? Okay, I'm always like that. So
almost like something uncomfortable to make them comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one thing I hear about my clients. They're like, oh my God, you captured me perfectly. I don't understand. I was like, well, because I'm quirky. So my quirkiness is actually the best thing for you for this session. And I love clean, colorful shots. So I keep my brand like that. It has to be clean, it has to be colorful. And I know it's a variety of different ways you can shoot, but I just love just to catch that cleanness and the color in a person, because that's what brings out the picture itself. People just don't understand color actually brings that personality out of somebody. So
that's it. Okay, so what would you say then about me? I mean, and we're going to get into this, but you're an occupational therapist by trade. You're a photographer who likes color. What about people like me who only ever wears a black T-shirt? What do we do?
Okay, if it makes you feel better, the only thing I do is wear black myself.
Okay.
I'm in black right now.
So you're trying not to compete with the colorful imagery that you're creating.
Yeah, but also I look better in black. That's my signature color.
Yeah. I feel you.
If I do any other color, it'd probably be purple or green. So
okay,
mostly in black.
Okay, well, then we're kindred spirits in some way, because literally every single day, and I joke about it, and my girlfriend even gives me a hard time about it too. But I'm like, hey, what should I wear tonight when we go out on a date? And of course, that's the ongoing joke. The reality is, I'm going to wear a black t-shirt, a V-neck black t-shirt, size medium from Express. I love them to death. I've been wearing them for years, and that's what I do. But it keeps things very, very simple. But I had to ask you the question about color. I'd like, in fact, again, going back to your homepage, the color on your homepage is wonderful, and it's varying as well. And you talk about your personality. I mean, in your bio on your website, you say, I am just a Southern girl with a bright and bubbly personality. And that's a pretty great summation. I like this, and I know I've mentioned this in the podcast before, but I love it when I can hear that kind of energy in somebody's voice, because we're doing this exclusively via audio. There's no video involved. And I love that energy that's coming through in your voice. And I'm sure that translates to your clients. And this is something really important to keep in mind with everybody. You know, as much conversation as there is in culture about personality types, and there's some significance to that, I don't think that we should limit ourselves by just simply saying, hey, I'm this personality type, so I'm not smiley, I'm not bubbly, because the reality is that most of our clients are going to play off that energy. I mean, I'm naturally playing off Tosha's energy. I hear that excitement, that energy in her voice. That gets me excited. It makes it that much better an interview for you, the listener, to hear. And you need to think about that, translate that to how you engage with your clients, because if they get a sense that you actually want to connect with them, you want to engage with them, that will translate to the quality of the photographs that you're able to capture. So I want to just kind of highlight that at the beginning. Again, I love your energy, Tosha. I know that we're going to get into this a little bit more later on in the conversation, but the focus that you have on bringing healing to your subjects on an deeper emotional level through your photography, I'd love to, I mean, I'm just speaking objectively or maybe subjectively here. I'd love to see that focus on your homepage, because I can't imagine that there's anybody else. And when we talk about the idea of brand position and what sets us apart, I don't know that there would be anybody else probably in either of those markets, as big as they are, as many photographers as there are, that specifically talk about that. It's a very unique value proposition and brand position.
Right. I'm actually redoing my website now. I'm just switched over to Show It, and right now I'm having a pain in the, how that goes, doing a new website.
Sure.
So everything is being redone now, and it's just, I do have that component under there as a passion project before I project it over to like offer it as a service.
I get it.
But yeah, I'm actually adding that now. So that website there is going to be different in 3 weeks. So we're hopefully it'll be done in 3 weeks. So
well, we're crossing our fingers. So hopefully by the time this episode comes out, actually, everybody listening in will be able to see that new website. And yeah, I'm a huge fan of, we talk again about brand position quite a bit. Sometimes we spend 10, 15 minutes talking about this on some of the episodes. But the reason it matters is because there are so many photographers out there. I mean, again, we're talking about massive markets like Atlanta in particular, Birmingham, still pretty large market. And there are so many photographers out there. Not only that, there's just so much noise to sift through on a daily basis. We're already spending time going through Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and Snapchat and everything else. So the potential client is seeing a lot, pictures and text all the time. So if we don't effectively figure out how to communicate in just a split second, really, it takes maybe 2-3 seconds to read a phrase that sums up how we're different from other photographers, then we miss out on an opportunity to make a bigger impact on that person that's looking for somebody, in this case, who, I mean, like the idea that they can come to you not only for photography, but almost like a therapy session in the process is so appealing, especially for somebody who's nervous in front of the camera, and certainly much more those who are struggling with various issues in their lives, self-image or otherwise. That's really a beautiful idea. So I'm going to cheer from the background that you somehow begin to implement that in your site even more, because I think that's really cool. But props to you for creating just beautiful imagery there on the home site. And that certainly will draw potential clients, I should say, in. That'll be really, really good. Talk to me about your experience as a business owner. How long have you been in business so far?
I started really as a hobbyist when my daughter was born, being a photographer.
Okay.
Because, we're expensive. I know that because I know my price list. So I wanted to be able to capture my daughter, myself during the stages that were most pertinent to her, because I was in school as an OT when she was born. So I feel like if I could take pictures of a kid, it'll help me. And then I started branching out doing other things like, community service stuff, just portraits of other people. So I really became a business owner about 8 years ago. And I stayed low key because I wanted to keep the job of, I'm an occupational therapist. I didn't want nobody to know I did pictures. And then people start sharing my stuff on social media, and that shows the power of social media.
Yeah.
So then it's just 8 years now, and I'm going really strong for the last 4 years. So I finally found out what's my niche, what I'm good at.
Yep.
And
I'm doubling down on it.
Yeah, and now I have a good mastermind group that helps me a lot too. So I'm fairly excited how they pushed me to get where I am right now.
Well, so 8 years, what is one of the biggest lessons, or maybe the biggest lesson that you've learned as a photography business owner during that time frame? Like if you had 15 seconds in an elevator and there's a photographer there and you had to share one piece of advice, what's the thing that comes to mind from your experience so far?
Is believe in yourself. Even though you may have people around you that push you to say you can do this, you're not gonna be able to do that if you can't believe in yourself. And I can say that from experience. Like everybody's like, "Oh, Tosha, you're so good. I don't know why you're doing this and that." But internally for me, it was like, I don't see it. I feel like I messed up here. This is messed. The lines is messed. The color's messed up. I messed up the skin tone. But you have to believe in yourself in order for your own craft to be able to be successful. So,
and I'm going to play the cynic here from the outside. I mean, this idea of believing in yourself, it's something that we hear about a lot in culture these days, but what does that look like on a practical level? How did you realize that for yourself?
I guess when people start, like when you have people that kind of bring things to you, like some of the clients I have now are clients I would never think I would ever have in my life. Or like a lot of people in Atlanta, I shoot a lot of brands in Atlanta, especially bloggers, people, they're trying to do new things, they're new business, small business owners. And they're like, "Oh, we saw your work in Birmingham and we were wondering like, oh, you do so good with detail work." I'm like, "Really? I just thought it was normal." And they were, and just hearing that feedback. I'm a person who's like a receiver sometimes, but I rather give, and it's hard to me to receive. But when I was able to receive it, and I'm a Virgo, so we all know that that main concept messes us up a lot. I was just very critical of myself, and then hearing the feedback, and then I guess the last thing I heard from my father before he passed away was he was like, "You have done so well in your business. I really want you now to expand beyond where you are now because you're that gifted, and you will succeed even when I'm here or not."
Oh my goodness. Wow. That's so powerful. How long ago did he pass away?
My dad actually passed away 4 years ago. And that's actually what started my project with the emotional stuff with the photography. So it's pretty cool.
Well, and we're going to get into more of that in detail here in just a little bit, but what a beautiful thing to be left with, that encouragement, that message to ultimately, as you're saying, believe in yourself, to run with it. So, I mean, I'm thinking, again, practical here, because just to be clear, by the way, I love the idea of an inspirational message like believe in yourself. Don't want to minimize that. But I also know that it's easy, especially in this day and age, when we're seeing these quotes on Instagram and Facebook, and people are saying them in inspirational talks or whatever it is, to just be like, "Oh, that's nice," and not know what it actually means or not know how to actually translate it to day-to-day life. One of the things that I'm hearing, though, from you is the feedback that you were getting from people was encouraging, and obviously primarily from your father. And so surrounding yourself with people that believe in you, that will proactively encourage you, is a really great practical way to implement that idea in your life. Because I get it too. Like my issues of self-esteem have been quite rampant over the years. And of course, I can delve into the psychology of why, but ultimately, a big part of what can make a difference in that realm is having a great support structure around you. And so that's really good. And
I've been very blessed with that, because I'm one of the pillars of the art community in the Birmingham area. I plan Day of the Dead. I plan Taco Fest.
Wow.
And so I'm proud of that. So me being there and being around that culture all the time, they're like my main motivators. Like they helped me a lot, even when I was like, when I didn't hold a camera for a year. They're like, "Why are you not having your camera now?" I'm like, "Because I feel like I suck." And they're like, "No, you don't. You don't suck." So I just needed that push, because if I didn't get that push, I feel like I would just be strictly not doing what I love.
Well, it's a good message for everybody out there. Make sure you're surrounding yourself with great people who are going to not only encourage you, but also push you along the way. I think that's great too. I crave that for well, again, psychological reasons I could delve into here, but I crave somebody pushing me and then simultaneously encouraging me as well, being like, "Hey, you know what? You can do better." And then, "Oh my word, that's awesome. Way to implement that thing, or way to do this thing. Okay, now strive for this thing or push here or get better here. I like the challenge, but surrounding ourselves with people that will do both of those things is really, really important. Talk to me about time. It's a challenging thing, right? I know this personally right now. Of course, Photographers Edit is a company that I'm heavily involved in, one of the owners of. We're getting ready to launch a new brand, and it involves an app and the development of an app, and that's been pretty stressful. And yet, I want to make sure that I'm not taking away from the way that I engage with my kids or with my girlfriend, and certainly her kids as well. So, like, how do you go about managing your time so that you're not just in work mode all the time, that you can make space for yourself and also for the important people in your life?
Oh, wow. That's actually something I just talked about with somebody last week about how overwhelmed I was.
Really? Okay. So this is very real for you then.
Yeah, it's very real because since I do shoot in Birmingham and Atlanta, I spend 4 days here in Birmingham or in Atlanta or 3 days here and there back and forth. I have one kiddo who's going to college, and then I have another kiddo who's in high school. So for me, it's still hard. Like, I try to keep Sundays open for my kids, but I have a lot of people still come up, send me stuff, and I shouldn't be checking my email, but I'll look at it but not respond. If I'm out on an assignment, I'm usually taking my kids with me. I ask for media credentials or anything else, and I just take them with me. Yeah, okay. I mean, like, usually if it's an event I know my kid's going to like and I know that I can interact with them and keep them cultural and active in the community, I usually ask for media credentials for my kids because I'm like, hey. I love that. Yeah, because I'll say, like, hey, I work as an OT part-time. I haven't seen my kids. I miss my kids. If you don't mind just sending me this is if I can spend time with my kids when I'm not shooting. Yeah. So usually when I'm doing sessions like that or my commercial corporate work, they'll give me something just to be with them, even food passes for them as well. And even if I'm out of town, I'll take them out of town. And when I'm done with a session or before, we either go to breakfast or we do dinner. And then next day we'll do something together before I start even trying to edit, because right now I'm learning that I need to start outsourcing my work now to give me more time with my kids.
Hey, there's this really great company I could tell you about. I think it's called Photographers Edit.
Oh, yeah. I actually just went ahead and downloaded everything, and I listened to my friend Meredith because she's been on me for a while about it. Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I told her, like, yeah, I'm feeling that overwhelming because you told me that. I told her that I felt like I would never have it, and now I feel it. Yeah. So now I'm just, structuring it with my time when I'm working with my kids. And I try to set a day out, usually Sunday is the days I spend with my kids. And if not that, I try to make a vacation of one of my assignment and I take them with me. So. Well,
and I like that. I think that's really, there's something interesting that I've found. Maybe this is a little selfish, but when my kids know what I do, they can actually have conversation with me about what I do, and of course the reality is, as much as I know I crave the ability, the opportunity to be able to connect with my kids on various levels, they have certain interests, I have certain interests, and those interests don't necessarily align all the time. I like to ride motorcycles. My 14-year-old daughter's not naturally going to engage me in deep conversation about riding motorcycles, right? So the question is, how can we do things that will create kind of points of common interests or conversation? And first of all, we take time, weekends or otherwise, evenings together and do various activities. We'll take various trips through the year. So we have those experiences that we can share in. But then if they actually know a little bit of what I do, I think that they can learn through watching us work. And then they also have a point of reference, and it means conversation. And I was just mentioning this on a recent episode as well, but my daughter recently has just been engaging me in a wonderful, and she's only 14, but wonderful level, just actually showing curiosity about what I'm doing. Hey, how did this thing go? How did your meeting go? How did the testing go or whatever? And it means the world to me that she would actually take the time to do that. And of course, it's also a good reminder for me that, hey, I need to make sure that I understand what she is interested in, what she's engaging in, and engage her in conversation there as well. But all that to say, the idea of that you've suggested of taking kids along with you on jobs when you can do that and still maintain some level of, I guess, professional appeal or appearance rather, I think that's a really interesting idea. And I love that those companies are making that happen for you too. That's really cool.
Yeah, that's the main thing. Like, people know that I'm a really big family person, and there are times when I would go bid for events I know they want to go to. Yeah, and I'm like, I'll say, hey guys, I found this. I'm gonna see, can I bid to work here? And then when I'm able to get it, they're like, oh yeah, cool. They both love helping with my lighting setup. They help me change my lights. They help me change out my lenses.
Oh, I love that.
So my daughter particularly knows like the way I function in sessions. So she's usually like, Mom, you need that 7200. I'm like, well, thank you. Now you tell me once I'm using the 24/7.
That's hilarious. How old is she?
She's 18.
Okay.
So.
That's great. She's totally reading you, playing off you. That's really awesome.
Yeah, she looks at my facial expressions, but I need to really learn how to tone down a little bit. But she knows me quite well.
I was going to say, our kids are pretty smart. They can tend to read us like a book. I have a 14 and a 17-year-old, and yeah, I think they can read me pretty well too. That's funny. Well, that's great. That's a great recommendation and piece of advice. If you can't create, I mean, and it's always important, as you were saying, even Tosha, you set Sundays aside usually to spend with your family, but if there are other opportunities where you can bring them along and still connect with them, I think that's a great piece of advice. Talk to me about an impactful business or a self-help book, maybe even a podcast that you've read or listened to that's made a big impact on you.
Well, I'm not a person who can sit down and read a book. I'm just not going to lie about that.
Fair.
Because I'm always on the go.
Yeah.
So I have like a list of ones. And of course, this podcast I listen to when I'm going to Atlanta.
Oh, awesome.
The second one I listen to is called Gifts to Myself. It's like a life coaching thing that really helps me a lot to get through a lot of things.
Gifts to Myself. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Who is that by? Do you know?
I can't remember. I look at it, but yeah, it's Gifts to My Future Self, I mean.
Okay. Perfect.
The third one I listen to is Focus. I think her personality is funny. I love it how she interacts with her listeners and stuff. Okay. So that's pretty good. And Gold Diggers, of course. So,
yeah, which has a massive audience too. Okay, very cool. Yes. But we'll make sure to find these and link to these in the show notes. And again, just a reminder for everybody listening in, if you're new or have been listening for a while and you're not taking advantage of the show notes, if you go to Bokeh, Bokeh podcast.com, the resources, the links, the gear, and certainly the talking points from these episodes that we're pushing out, that information's in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com. I know that some of you may be using a podcast player too that allows you to be able to see the show notes within the app. Take advantage of that. There are some apps, I think, that format the show notes correctly, others that don't. But either way, bokehpodcast.com, and you can link to these podcasts that Tosha just mentioned as well. Talk to me about your camera bag. This is kind of a fun question. I wonder if you have something maybe a little bit random in your camera bag that enables you to be a better photographer.
Oh, man, this is going to be so embarrassing a little bit.
I can't wait. This is good.
Okay, I keep two things. One's going to be like kind of somewhat depressing, and the other thing is like, okay, I really got to have this. I keep taffy in my camera bag.
Really? Like saltwater taffy?
Yeah, like my mom used to live in Savannah, Georgia.
Okay.
A little bit, and we're military brats.
Which is like the capital of saltwater taffy, it seems.
Exactly. Yeah. I must have taffy. So I have peppermint taffy, pear taffy always in my bag.
Did you say pear taffy?
Yeah, it's so good.
Oh, I don't think I've had pear taffy before. Okay, we might have to try that soon.
Yeah, it's at Whole Foods. They do have it at Fresh Market and Whole Foods, which I was shocked about. I was like, ooh, now I can just get it when I want it. So.
That's great. Okay, so taffy, and what's the other thing?
The other thing is I keep a card that my dad gave me whenever I get down. I just always keep it in my camera bag. It's laminated and everything. And the message was, love you, keep your head up high. God will bless you always. Love you, Dad. So I keep that in my bag as a motivator, because when I see that when I'm feeling low and I'm like at a shoot, like, okay, I can't figure out what I'm going to shoot, how I'm going to do this, I just really pull that out. So, okay, I got it now. So it's like a comfort for me in my bag.
No, I love that. I think it's a beautiful thing that you can take that with you where you go too. And wow, the relationship that you had with your dad, he sounds like just a really incredible person.
Oh, he was awesome. I mean, I at least can say he was my best critic, and he also did it not so nice because he was like a sergeant. And I'm like, wow. Okay, I understand now. I will behave. So,
yeah. But it's interesting. I mean, sometimes you hear those stories of personalities who are only hard and they're only hardcore and everything, the way that they communicate, it's almost always just in a very harsh manner. But it sounds like there's a lot of love mixed in there as well.
Yeah, he was actually he was a business owner himself. So he actually pushed me to be more a photographer business instead of me always working for somebody else.
Yeah. And
it's hard to move away from working for somebody else right now, because that's where, that's concurring income. So it's always happening.
Well, so. and really that's a great kind of segue into our primary conversation today, which has to do with this idea of healing through photography. And I say this because you are by trade an occupational therapist. You alluded a little bit to the backstory earlier, but how did you even choose to go into the trade of occupational therapy? It's
going to be funny. Actually, my brother has lupus. And I used to see, when he was younger, he was like 11 years old, they reportedly, quote unquote, had the flu. And we were like, no, that's not happening, because he's not eating, he's losing weight. I think he lost like 15 pounds when he was 11. And we just kept noticing as he just declining every day. So when we went to the ER, he flatlined when we got there. Once we got there within 10 minutes, they said we have to put him on life support. He was on there for like a month and a half, and even gave us my parents choices about we might have to take him off because he's not responding to the meds and stuff. So at first it was more just like, oh, this is a heart condition. Then we find out 10 years later there's lupus. But he was homeschooled for a long time after being in the hospital. I call him the marshmallow man because he got big from the prednisone. So I used to crack on him and poke his face and everything.
Yeah, my brother had really bad asthma and took prednisone forever too. Yeah, so I know what that's like.
Oh yeah, and he used to get so mad at me because I was like, oh look, it's the dude from the Ghostbusters. Yay, Powerpuff Man. But we had the OT and the physical therapist come in, and they came and they did a lot of work with him. I mean, I was amazed. And on top of that, I have an aunt that's an occupational therapist, and I also have an aunt that's a physical therapist.
Okay.
I went particularly for school for pre-med. Got into med school, did a couple of months, and I was like, this is not for me. And then my aunt and my dad got to me, and they're like, you're too creative to be a doctor because they're going to look at you like you're weird because you're so actively open about stuff, and you just it's too nice. I'm like, really? I thought you're supposed to be nice being a doctor. But from that, watching what my brother had to go through and what they did with him, and it was just amazing. Med school was cool, but I mean, it was just not my place because I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a creative and be able to do that in my craft, and just to help people in that way instead of just not always saying, okay, I'm gonna write you a script, or hey, you got this diagnosis here.
Yeah.
But my brother probably was the main pusher to be an OT just because I've seen that, like, I would imagine how to get him sitting up with a sitting balance if he didn't have a Nintendo, which I still do have, my old-fashioned one.
Yes.
And watching him doing that, and I'm like, wow, that's how you work on, sitting on that ball and stuff. So let me do this with my kids. So he was the main motivator. And then my family, and then watching this trait going on, like, yeah, I love it. PT, I didn't like because it's just so repetitive and it's the same. It's like boot camp for lower body extremities. So
that's a funny way to put it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. That's how we say, like, OTs are like the nice ones that do fun stuff, and the PT is just boot camp. And then sometimes when I'm in clinic with my kids, they're like, oh no, Miss Tosha, she's like really boot camp. She'll like really mean to us. I'm like, no, I'm not. You just got to do it. I just don't take it. So.
Well, what was the turning point though? And by the way, beautiful backstory. And I really appreciate you sharing that with us. But how did you then, I know we're fast forwarding quite a bit here, but you began in photography. At what point did you say, you know what, like some of these therapeutic efforts that I'm making, the way that I'm engaging with my therapy clients, like maybe I can somehow begin to implement some of these ideas or these principles into the way that I engage with my photographic subjects?
With myself, and I can openly say this to people because I accepted it. When my dad passed away, my dad actually died unexpectedly. I talked to my dad an hour before he passed away. I went into a really deep hole of grief. I thought it was my fault because I thought I can bring him back because I work in the medical field.
Wow.
And I just thought it was just my fault, period, because he was on his way to meet my daughter for her lacrosse game. I was supposed to pick him up, but he tripped on the rug and hit his head. Oh, goodness. So for OT, for me, I'm teaching fall management within the homes. Yeah. And that was the main thing we talked about. I said, hey, Dad, don't do this and that. But then when I started taking pictures of myself, my own grief and my own depression, I started noticing the trends with my eyes, especially when I'm using my special light, like my ring lights or any type of special lighting thing with the harsh shadows and stuff.
Yeah.
So I started noticing, like, wow, this is very better because, like, once I picked up my camera, I felt better and started photographing my own self. I was like, okay, I understand how I feel now. This is what I look like when I'm grieving. This is what I look like. This is how people perceive me. Because the world right now, they put mental health as like a big stigma of like, you're ugly, you're not looking good. It's depressing. Like if you even look through Getty Images, it's like depressing. Like, I don't want to be depressed looking like that. So just seeing that stigma and how people have, like when you say you have depression or you're grieving, it's just what really motivated me to turn that course to make it look beautifully and how we engage with these clients. So,
I hear that a conversation about stigma, and I can see where it probably still exists. I mean, there's this maybe internal judgment that kind of happens where you're like, oh, that person says they're depressed or they have anxiety or they've been dealing with these issues for some period of time, and maybe some internal judgment that's going on. But do you really feel like, I mean, it seems like the conversation around mental health has become so popular as of late. Do you think that there's still a really significant stigma there?
I think it's more than a stigma, more for the African American community, more like women of color.
Interesting.
And
okay.
what I know is like with my research, because I'm doing a research study right now, a photo research study now with this,
Okay.
that if you look at how people talk about mental health, it's right now like, oh, okay, it's always this percentage. But when you look at the women of color percentage, it's high, but nobody never focuses on them, go there and talk to them. And not, it's just
interesting.
And they're scared. I mean, sometimes it's fear for us to know that people know because we have enough battles already to deal with, but toning into that part because I run in my project and what I do, I want to be specific with it.
Yeah.
Because I want to highlight that point because I never see anything that involves that. And the projects I've seen online by Googling and other things, I'm like, okay, they're not going to match up to my project because they're doing it like you're writing a piece of paper and you're like, hey, I have a mental health disorder. Okay, cool. Is there a backstory behind it? And nobody never brings that up. Like the backstory, what's the trigger words, how they feel, why are you here? Why are we here together right now?
So is that some shortcoming on the part of the companies or the organizations that are doing the research work that they tend to focus on the white communities and there's not as much conversation with the Black communities? Or is there some stigma within the Black community that is, I don't know, maybe kind of inhibiting people from coming out and talking about it? Or like what are your thoughts on that?
I feel like it's a combination of both. And I feel like, and I'm a real big research bird because I have a doctorate in my field in occupational therapy.
Wow.
And that was the one thing I noticed, like when I'm looking at these trends and I keep up with trends every day, seeing how things goes. And when I'm seeing like, okay, I'm happy that, so-and-so going through here, but like, when you look in the African American community, it's more like, oh my God, like, okay, this person going through that, this and that, but what's causing it? Because like our statistics about, social class, jobs and anything, it never comes into, they always making that one big number, but not the specific. And I would like to see more details about what's causing this here. How can we help this community equally, not over what community, but more equally together?
Yeah. That's kind of weird too, because research, I mean, it seems as though innate to research is the details. So the fact that the details aren't paid attention to is an odd thing.
Oh yeah, and it's more for me. It's like when I start looking at my project, like how can I help other people? Like how can I help? Like let me start off with this community first, and then move on to this community, and then make it together like a joint effort to see how it goes. So it's been working out well, and especially people like I have a semicolon on my ankle, and I'm targeting people with semicolons. So when I see that, I say, hey, can I photograph you? Let's talk about this. Why do you have your semicolon?
Well, but I have to ask you the same question. What's the significance of that for you?
That my story never ends.
Okay.
It's called the Semicolon Project, and it's about people who have depression, anxiety, grief, people who also have attempted suicide. But it's always to show it's just mental health awareness. So usually when I see people, I'm like, oh, let me talk to you. Because it's just like a conversation piece and why we have it. So.
That's beautiful. Yeah, and it's fun when you have. I have tattoos on both of my arms, the inside of both of my arms. And one of the things that I thought was really cool about putting them in that particular place is they're not obvious all the time.
Right.
But when they are seen, like if I'm sitting and having coffee or dinner or something like that with somebody else, and I'm engaging with them a little bit closer, then they'll be able to see those tattoos, and then there may be a question, and there's opportunity to connect over that. And the idea of being able to connect with somebody else who has that same tattoo, and then ultimately a similar backstory where you can relate and you can connect through that is a pretty beautiful thing. But that really brings us back to your photography. The fact that you're able to engage with some of your subjects in this realm is really, really powerful. And I'd be curious, first of all, what principle behind therapeutic photography is generating the biggest results when you're in the way that you're engaging with your clients?
I think it's identity of self. Usually when I'm shooting a client, it's really stressed out knowing why we're there, first of all, for them. And then I always start off with a simple head start, just the head shot, just to get them to interact with me and to make faces, have fun with me. And then we start talking about like, so I usually go and so, I'm happy that you're taking the headshot. Let's talk about your story. What's going on with you? Do you have a word that's your trigger? What makes you feel the way you do? And so I usually do that. And it's kind of funny because my mom was sitting in a session with me one day and I freaked her out. Because she was just like, Tosha, you're going to take somebody so deep that you're not going to be able to pull them back out. I said, Mom, I'm able to pull it back because I know what words and what trigger and how to get them back to where they are.
Wow.
And so what I do is I usually just generally start off with a general conversation, then they get to their life, what's going on. And then I start photographing, boom, emotion 1, boom, emotion 2, 3. And then when I do these series of pictures, because I don't let them see my camera. I don't let them look at the back. I feel like it's just going to be not the justice what they need to see is back of my camera. And that's actually one of my biggest pet peeves too. Like, why do you need to see the back of my camera? That's why I'm here. So
yeah, that's true.
You. And so when they see the images, I do both color. I do like a cool, darkish, moody picture, which is really edited well. And I do a black and white because in black and white, you can see a lot of emotions in it, which is perfect for me because since my style is colorful, me bringing it back to black and white for you to understand the significance of their feelings is really cool to see.
Yeah.
So when I show them the series, like I start off with one headshot that probably from that night, like, oh, this is what we did. And then I bring it over and they're like, oh my God, this is what I look like. I never seen myself like that. Now I understand how I feel inside. Because most of us with mental health or depression or anything like that, we're internally hurting. And people don't know how much we're hurting from the outside because we're trying to keep that face to be strong and happy.
Right.
And then when you're letting loose and you start showing and you understand like, wow, I am really hurting and I really need to talk or I really need to get that. Recently, I had a client who was also a really good friend of mine. She has depression and anxiety and I shot her. She's a beautiful girl. Very beautiful. I love her bald head. I always like make jokes about it. I was like, yeah, I can shine that and bling it up to the sky and stuff. Because it's how, it's just how my personality is.
I love that. Yeah.
She talks about me all the time. And when I did her pictures and the funny part, I got mad at her. I threw water on her just be funny because we were just talking and I just threw my water and it came out good because I'm saying like, wow, now I can really see your anxiety because we're, you switched up and her anxiety is about just going outside and people seeing how she really is. And like, she's a great person, but she feels like she doesn't feel that way about herself inside. For her seeing that and understanding, okay, see, yeah, this is my emotion, and thank you for understanding, and thank you for photographing and capturing it. And I was like, oh my God, you're gonna make me cry because her post actually did make me cry. It was like 3:00 in the morning. I'm like, oh my God, she's talking about me, and I didn't think I did all that.
Wow.
And then I had another lady with postpartum depression after having her first child, and her son's hand coming from the bottom of the camera while she was depressed. She said that really made a difference and like how she needs to change her facial when she's around her child because she didn't want her child to feel that aura around her like that. So it's been an interesting project and watching people's emotions. And I even photographed myself. And
really,
I haven't showed it yet because I look really ugly in it. But I started thinking about what was the one thing in my life that changed my life. And I was happy smiling in my headshots. And then when I started thinking and then a song came on that was unexpected, I just started bawling and I just started snapping myself. So I know that internally I'm still hurting and I do outwardly say when I'm hurting, but seeing how I look when nobody's not around was like, wow, this makes me feel better. Like it's okay for me not to be okay. So. Wow.
But you summed it up really beautifully at the end there. It's okay not to be okay, which is really a good segue into my next question. But I want to say, first of all, when you talk about the identity of self, really what you're doing there is helping them understand how they feel through that session, which is really powerful. But to the next question, what are the biggest benefits? And I think we've kind of answered it initially here, but
sorry.
No, not at all. It's great. I think the biggest benefit, what are the biggest benefits of your clients, or I guess what are the biggest benefits that your clients have seen through this therapeutic photographic practice? And I know you and I chatted about this just a little bit beforehand, and you had mentioned this idea of it's okay not to be okay. You highlighted that just now for when you were talking about photographing yourself. Can you expound on that a little bit? What does that mean?
It's just a realization because, like I said, that stigma about mental health and going through things, because people always feel like there's a certain time limit to go through something. Like, okay, you lost somebody, you should be healed by 6 months to a year, or you may have a situation that pop up. You may have something that's a judgment that caused you to have that seasonal depression. Like I was raised to always be strong, and people tell me I'm strong all the time, but internally for me, I hurt. But I'm like, it's not okay for me to show my expressions because people are going to think I'm weak. People are going to think that I don't know how to handle something. And when I start looking at myself in these images, it's okay for me to cry. We all need that one cry. If we just taking a shower and cry. And like, I could just be sitting in my car and me commuting back and forth from Birmingham to Atlanta. And I'm sitting here like, okay, now I'm alone. I don't have anybody to see me who will judge me.
Huh.
And I just started crying. When I realized it was okay, and since I'm one of the planners of Day of the Dead in Birmingham, and I've been with them close to 10 years before my dad passed away, I mean, I openly cried the first time I made her a friend that were an altar for my dad, because I'm like, okay, I'm in a place of people understanding how I feel. And they won't judge me because this is a day of remembrance. I mean, if you look at the movie Coco, you will see the significance of the ofrendas and altars and certain things. Yeah. And that's how the festival here in Birmingham is.
Wow.
And when I realized it was okay for me to cry openly, it was fine. And even my best friend, who's the director of the art museum here in Birmingham, she lost her sister. And she said the same thing to me. And I'm actually photographing her in a couple of weeks with her sister that's doing a ghost grief session with her. We were always talking about how everybody sees us in the community as being strong women, but both of us are hurting, and we need to show people it's okay for us to show emotion. Like, I don't want to be like somebody who just stuck up and just don't care. I want people to know that I understand too how you feel. So I want people to come approach me about things if they need help to get through things, because people did that for me, and I would love to extend it to somebody else who needs it as well.
That's beautiful. I mean, you're doing this job of creating space beautifully enough, not only for yourself, but also for others to be more open with your emotions. And, you know, the fact that you then have the opportunity to capture that is beautiful. You know, and there is you used the word stigma earlier. There is a stigma in our culture around the idea of maybe not being strong enough, or at least there has been. And now there is a shift. You know, it's funny, if you watch our culture, there are these shifts that happen, and they tend to be these massive pendulum shifts where they go the opposite direction. And now you have some people that are they're like, I don't know if that's just a welcome opportunity to be able to get some kind of reassurance that they're okay as a human being or whatever it is, but they're out there sharing their emotions and problems and trials all the time. and then that becomes exhausting, and you can't help but wonder if some of that is just to try to get attention. That's certainly not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is just the simple reality, which is expressing emotion, sadness, or for that matter, having feelings of depression. This is not a weird thing, a bad thing. And I love that. And while it's important to approach life with an effort at being proactive and finding the best in situations and continuing to move forward, to push forward through challenges, there's nothing wrong in the process with expressing that something is challenging, or expressing sadness, or feeling down about something. And again, I love the fact that you've not only created space for yourself to have those feelings, but creating spaces for your subjects to be able to have those feelings, to better understand those feelings, and then also to give them a beautiful gift and a portrait. It would be great, though, if we can kind of translate this in a practical way or an even more practical way to our listeners when it comes to the way that they're engaging their clients. And obviously, most of our listeners, if not all of them, are not going to be professional occupational therapists taking that training to their photographic sessions. But are there some ways that they can bring this approach, or even going into their photographic sessions with a focus on bringing some type of emotional healing to their subjects?
There's a couple of ways. The first one, I would probably say, don't be judgmental. And we know all of us are photographers, and we know how we are when we talk to somebody on the phone. We know most of us stalk people on social media to see who they are before we even shoot them. We know we do that.
It's true.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I'm one of those people too. Like, if I know that I'm about to photograph you, I need to see what's on your social media first, because I got to be around you. So don't be judgmental. I mean, like, approach a person like you met them the first time. Even you have met them the first time, just don't have any kind of preconceived notions about them. Like, oh, I saw that you were here last week. What are you? Type things, you know?
Yeah, so, it's really easy to quickly judge. I mean, I think we're wired as human beings to be able to do that, and probably in many, if not most cases, do that quite well. But I think it's more relevant to contexts where you got to make a quick decision for the sake of safety, versus you're going to have a photography or photographic session with somebody, or begin to develop some type of working relationship with somebody in the community, and you have the opportunity to get to know them. You can't go into it just assuming. I actually have kind of a somewhat humorous story myself with this. Is very, very close to me, which is the first time I ever went out on a date with my girlfriend, who I've been in a relationship with for quite some time now. My initial assumption or projection on her was very, very simplistic, and it was based in past experience, engaging with other people that were very different than her. And had I continued down that road after that first date, our relationship would have never happened. Unfortunately, we kept talking, and then come to find out there's this whole different colorful version of her behind the scenes that she simply wasn't just like throwing out there on the first date. That is just beautiful. I love contrasts, and I've seen that in her and in our relationship. But had I just gone on assumption, like you're talking about, Tosha, I would have missed out on a beautiful, beautiful aspect of my life. So it's really important, as you say, not to go in judgmental, to assume. There's no question we all have some ability, or at least most of us anyway, have some ability to be able to read somebody pretty well up front, but understand that there's more underneath and give that opportunity to come up.
Right. And I do have a habit of reading people up front. I'm like trying to keep it to myself sometimes.
Yeah.
And I have the hardest problem with my facial expressions, but I still haven't figured out how to fix it.
I am very much like you. Yeah. I'm so bad to let that out.
And I'll be sitting there like, man, like I know this girl and I know what she's done. Now I gotta shoot her. So, let me get this done and make it detailed about what I want her to do in this session compared to what she wants to do. So
That's great. That's great. What's another principle?
Another thing is to be an active listener. And I had to say, this is one of my biggest pet peeves for people in general. If I'm telling you something's going on with me, I don't want to hear about your life at the same time. I need to listen. I need somebody to listen to me to get it out. And that's the problem with people. Like, it's always about, okay, I know you're going through this, but guess what? I'm going through something worse.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. I mean, I have a couple of friends. I actually have a friend right now who's like that. And it's like in my head, I'm like, oh my God, I just need to talk to somebody to get it out, not to hear and compare situations, but I just need to get it out.
Yeah.
And I know for me, since I work as an occupational therapist, that's how I get my assessments. That's how I get my evaluation. I must be an active listener as well as engaged with the conversation and get to the leading questions, like what will help them during the session, or what will help them just to feel relaxed with me. I have clients that probably are uptight for the first 30 minutes. And I'm sitting here like, I say, what can I do to trigger them? And that's when the social media stalking helps.
Sure.
So I'm like, oh, I saw you were here last week. Did you
Yeah.
enjoy doing this and stuff like that? Or did you have fun with your kids here? And it usually opens them up, and they start going out and talking about their whole, I may know the life story for a lot of people, half in Birmingham right now, just because I know how to engage and be that listener and then key those points in there to engage them in conversation and learning more about them. So
Yeah, it's not, there's so much conversation in the photography industry about many photographers being introverts and how they're apprehensive getting to know somebody for the first time or meeting with a client they've never met with before and going in. And it doesn't have to be, that's a loaded topic and we'd have to pick that apart piece by piece. But one of the things that I've realized, because I haven't, and it's still something I'm working on, I haven't always been the best small talker. Like if I have a chance to go deep in a conversation, then I kind of welcome that. I enjoy that, but I'm not great at just kind of surface level small talk, which for many people is what helps them relax. Right. And I'm reminded of a former late night talk show host called Craig Ferguson. And I'll add the caveat here that he's certainly it can be off color and quite flirtatious with the female guests that he has on his show. But one of the things that I learned from him, despite that, is his ability and observed. He had these cue cards that, a lot of talk show hosts will have. They'll have cue cards with questions or talking points that they'll go through for their guests. And he said that he would literally take those cue cards. It was this thing that he did, and he would tear them up and he'd just kind of toss them behind him very dramatically, like toss the cue cards, the torn up cue cards behind him. And then he would just ask random questions. But one of the things that he would do is he'd ask what seemed like a very random question. The person answers that. And then it was very easy for him to take some word or idea or concept or place that somebody mentioned from that sentence or from that response, and then ask them a question about that thing. And then you can kind of continue that trend. So the idea of creating conversation for the sake of helping somebody feel comfortable, again, especially I'm talking to you who label yourselves introverts. It doesn't have to be overly complicated. You don't have to go extremely deep to begin with. You just want to create an atmosphere of comfortability, ease of conversation, and you can do that very simply by just picking something, asking a question about it, actually actively listening, which is so, so huge, Tasha. I'm so glad that you bring this up. Hear what they say, take something from what they said, and ask another question and just continue that. And most people aren't used to being engaged in that way. I mean, that's part of why I'm so taken aback by my daughter asking me about work, because I'm so used to being the interviewer on the podcast, 300 plus episodes now. I'm used to being the one that's kind of overseeing a team. I'm not used to the idea of somebody asking me about me and asking me questions. And so my daughter takes the time to do that. I'm kind of floored. Most people aren't used to actually being engaged in that way. And it doesn't take a lot of effort. You can keep it simple. Just take a topic, ask a question, hear, listen, ask another question. And that act of active listening is a really, really important principle to good conversation. I'm really glad you bring that up.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I'm both an extrovert and an introvert. Mine's a time thing.
Okay.
And it's kind of weird because between 8 to 6, maybe I'm a really good extrovert, and then when it comes to after that, I'm an introvert. It's so much I can take with conversation, and I have to learn to work through that myself. So it's really hard because my kids really do tell people don't talk to my mom after 6 o'clock because she's gonna be kind of high strung. So.
That's funny. Okay, well, so let's. You started with don't be judgmental,
right?
And that's again a loaded topic in and of itself. But that's a great point of recommendation. The second piece of advice: be an active listener, truly present. Set your phone aside. Don't be thinking about the next thing you're doing, or some conversation you had earlier, or that thing that you saw on Facebook. Be an active listener, be present, be engaged, look the person in the eye, pay attention, and then respond accordingly. And I know you've got a third one for me. What's that?
Be empathetic. That's the thing. For me, it's not a pet peeve from I hear people, even in the photography world and even being in the therapy world, we're just sitting here okay, I'm sorry that happened to you. Okay, we just left it alone.
Right.
And usually my approach would be okay, I had a really bad day at work. Oh my God. I totally understand where you're going. What happened to you at work that made you feel this way? I feel how they feel, and I guess it's my aura, but I want to know how you feel. I want them to know that I really do care about them. People are just not clients to me. To me are they're people. They're individuals. They all have their personality. They're just not somebody who pays my bills. And that's how I approach each person that I have a client. I do have certain people I'm sitting here do I really want to be empathetic towards you? Just because I've seen how you interact with things and stuff. Sure. And I'm do I really want to do that? But I have to realize my personality is I'm going to be nice to anybody, no matter how mean they are to me or how they treat. I still have to be respectful. Mm-hmm. And that's just how I was raised. That's that military, my parents instilled that in me. Yeah. But you just have to, even though the person might be bad, you still have to have some kind of emotions for them and care for them and just have something for them. I know a lot of people have jealousy issues. People just have this, I have a niche against you and stuff. But we always got to show that we're caring human beings. That's the problem with the world right now. We have all this stuff going on. And, kids are being pulled from parents and stuff. I can't imagine being with my parents like that, being pulled away from them. I have to understand not having parents. So we got to have that sense of, we care. We understand where you're coming from. We may not understand, but let's show, at least present that we are trying to understand why you feel that way.
That's, empathy is something that I've struggled with, and I say struggle in that I was not good at it, and it's still something that I'm working through right now. There were a couple of people that came into my life that really just kind of threw a wake up call my way at the fact that I just wasn't empathetic enough. And if I was actually in the process of picking up my phone here, Tasha, to look. I've got a little dictionary on my iPhone called Word Book, and if I look up the word empathy, I'm just going to read this definition out loud here. The definition says understanding and entering into another's feelings. And I like the last part of that, entering into another's feelings. What does it take to literally open the door and walk into the emotion or the emotions of the person sitting there in front of you? And we have to set aside ego and whatever might be important to us in the moment. And again, that idea of active listening, truly be present. And then learn to feel, put yourself in a similar place as you were pointing out, Tasha, or relate what this person is describing to something like a similar instance in your life, and think about how you felt in that instance and feel that emotion with them right then. that is something that would make just a massive, massive difference, as you were saying as well, Tosha, in the world, if we were to implement this idea of empathy more consistently, more actively. And this is huge. But if we're able to do that, the way that we can then engage with our clients in front of the camera, the subject in front of the camera, is simply going to be different. The atmosphere that we create for them is simply going to be different. It's going to help them feel more comfortable. And that's huge. I think this is such a really, really important principle and concept, and I'm so glad that you share it.
Thank you. I mean, it helps me a lot with my business alone. I can really say that. Like, I used to be one of those people who just really didn't care. And then I started realizing, like, okay, being in practice for 14 years as an OT, I realized that it's a lot of people who have worse situations than I do.
Yeah.
I might be going through one thing, and I'm listening to these stories from parents and the kids, the teenagers themselves. I'm like, oh my God, maybe I need to stop looking at the world with these little rose-colored glasses that was meant on me. And I never had those glasses. It was just the way I was built, being raised in the military. So now it's more like, yeah, I can understand how you feel. And sometimes the problem is being empathetic is you take those feelings on yourself. Like, there are times I can't go to sleep at night thinking about what somebody told me.
Wow.
It could be a love-hate relationship with that word.
That's fair. Yeah, we have to find a healthy balance or a healthy distinction between our identity and the identity of others. But I would have way more respect for somebody who was, such as yourself, Tosha, who was going to sleep at night or trying to go to sleep at night and couldn't because they were feeling for somebody, rather than somebody who was kind of just cold and disconnected. And engaging with their clients and in that disconnected manner, which again, it's going to translate to the finished product. The images that you're going to get much of the time, if not most of the time, just aren't going to be as meaningful or as powerful. The emotion that can translate through to the camera, just not going to be the same. And so this is a great reminder, a great piece of advice for all of us. And this has been a wonderful conversation, Tosha. Again, I love your energy that you bring to conversation, and the people that get to interact with you in person are just as lucky as can be. Thank you for bringing that to us.
Thank you.
Will you just remind all of our listeners again where they can find you? We mentioned your website earlier, but you can throw that out there again and mention your social media as well.
Okay, like on Instagram, it's really weird because my kids did my Instagram and I want to keep it consistent with theirs. So I'll say it slowly. It's __ dot Tosha, TOSHA dot __. Yeah, my kids have theirs done that way, and they did mine. So I was like, okay, I stayed in a little trend. That's part of my quality time.
Yeah.
And then my Facebook is, you'll find, I don't know, you want my personal would just be Tosha Gaines. I mean, I'm pretty funny and open. You see all my adventures mostly on both my pages.
Okay.
So it's just Tosha, TOSHA, Gaines, GAINES. And then you can find me under Tosha Gaines Photography.
Well, we'll link to all of these accounts and your website in the show notes. And again, for those of you listening in, Bokeh, BOKEH, podcast.com is where you can find those show notes. Thanks again, Tosha, for making time for the Bokeh community.
Oh, no problem. Thank you for interviewing me, though. It was awesome.
Thank you so much for listening to the Bokeh Podcast. Will you let us know what you thought by leaving a review of the podcast in the Apple Podcast app? And I'd love to hear from you personally with your thoughts about the podcast and suggestions about future topics and guests for the show. My email is nathan@photographersedit.com. The Bokeh Podcast is brought to you by Milu, the simplest way for photographers and coordinators to collaborate on shot lists and timelines for weddings, parties, and other amazing events. Visit Milu, MIILU.com. This podcast is also brought to you by Photographer's Edit, custom image editing for the professional photographer. Visit photographersedit.com.